What is happening, guys? Welcome back to Redbeard's Garage, and on today's episode we're going to be talking about how to make the perfect notch every time using Centurial tools. Now this can speed up your fabrication process a ton. I've always done it by laying the tube, and I'm always guesstimating and triple notching stuff, and this is really going to speed up our process. So on screen you can see we have the string line tool, 2 magnets, 2 gator clips, and also their center line tool. All these tools are going to help us to be able to find out what notch we need and how long our tubing needs to be cut. Some extra tools we're going to be using is our tubing notcher that we've modified to go into a vise, as well as an angle finder tool. All the links to these products can be found in our video's description. We're going to go off this chassis here, which is a Manco Deuce. This is an old school chassis and it's probably not square. So we're going to go through the process of how to find out what the angle would be if we're going to put an X brace across this roof. So we're going to work on this main tube that's going to go from corner to corner, and we're using 1-inch tubing. So we're going to start off by placing our magnets on the frame and running our string line. So I'm going to place this magnet tool right there. These magnets are super strong, and I'm going to take the string line with the plumb bob, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my string line around this little lip they've made on the magnet. So that's going to hold me. And then I'm going to place this string across the tube wherever I want this notch to come in, and you can angle this magnet to make it line up. So I'm going to want my notch to leave, and this is the center line of our tube. So this is representing the center of our tube. So right there is where I'm going to want to go. So now I can roll out my string line and go to the opposite side. From the opposite side we can get our line where we want it for our center line, and then we can take this one and go from underneath. Now we can clamp that right there, and that's going to hold our string. Now we can set the rest of our roll aside. With the string line in place, now we can put our gator clips dead center of the tube. So we want to get that just as centered as we can on each side, and we're going to measure in between that to find out the overall length of our tube. I can actually pull this a little tighter. There we go. That gator clip dead center, and put this one dead center. If we measured in between these gator clips, that's the length of our overall length of our tube that we need to cut. Now we're going to be using this angle finder. This is what we have the links for in the video's description. These are from Amazon. They're super handy. I have a couple different links of them, and it's handy having all of them. We use all these things daily building chassis. And this chassis is probably not square, so we're going to want to check the angle on both sides and write that down, because that's going to be the angle that our notcher is going to come in. And this whole setup is assuming that you have a tubing notcher. We're going to do a video later on next week on what you would do if you're notching tube with a grinder, but this is set up for a tubing notcher. So we're going to turn on our angle finder, make sure it's zeroed out. Then we're going to lay it in the chassis and run it alongside the string line tool and find out what our notch is going to be. So it looks like we're pretty much at 66 degrees. Now we're not going to do a 66 degrees notch, because a straight notch would actually be 90 on this angle finder. So what we're going to do is minus 66 from 90, and that's going to be the notch we're going to come in with our notcher on this tube, which is 24 degrees. But we want to check this other side, because again, this frame isn't, perfectly square, and we just want to make sure our notches are tight as we want them. So it looks like this notch is 55 degrees, which would give us a 35 degree notch. We have a 24 degrees notch over there and a 35 degree notch over here. So now we can go cut our tube at whatever the length is between these two gator clips and notch it out. Looks like 40 and a half. So we're going to mark this at 40 and a half, because that was the distance between our two gator clips. Okay, so we're going to be clamping our tube down so we can mark center line on both sides. Now I used to use a door jamb to do this, but luckily we have the fab tables, and Centurial has this center line marking tool. So it has 9 different positions. Number 1 is going to be 1-inch tube, and then it is 1/8 inch increments after that. So you just add 1/8 inch from 1 inch and find out your tube center line. And you can also mark offset, and that was handy on, we built a chassis for SEMA and we had to make an offset notch. and we did it using this tool. Super handy, and if you do have a 3D printer at home, you can download their tools and print them right off, and then buy their hardware kit to be able to make these tools yourself. They are an open source company. They're trying to get people out in the garage working. But if you have the centerline tool, which I highly recommend, you can clamp it down to concrete, something where you have this fab table, luckily. So we're going to use it to clamp our tube from rotating. Once we have it clamped down, we have ours set on 1 inch, since this is 1 inch tube. We can just lay it down and run it along the tube. And that's going to mark our center line all the way down it. So the reason for marking center line is that's way we can make sure that both of our notches are on the same plane. So you don't want one notch coming in at this degree and this one coming in twisted, because then it's not going to fit in the chassis correctly, and it could make your tube ride high. So this is a surefire way that we know it's going to go in that notcher and be dead straight when we rotate it to do the opposite notch. So this is a tubing notcher that we modified to go into a vise. This would normally clamp into like a drill press. Now if you go on Centurio's website, you can see on screen they've made a kit, so you can go buy a Harbor Freight drill press and tubing notcher, and it comes with a stand you can basically mount to the floor and have a setup like this. And the good thing about theirs is if a tube ever gets caught, this could break your wrist. You know, these drills have a lot of power, where in the drill press setup that they have, that's never going to happen. It's not going to yank the drill out of your hand, and it makes tubing notching a lot more comfortable in your shop. So we will be reviewing that setup in a later video, but this is what we have, and it works very well. We need to set our first notch, which was 24 degrees, and we could go to 25 degrees. That 1 degree is not going to throw us off. So it's very hard to see. I can actually mark it with a silver Sharpie. So that silver dot there is center of our die. So we're going to rotate it to 25 degrees, and then we can tighten it up. And I got it a little bit less than 25, just a hair. We can tighten up our die. When we put our tube in here, we're using the flat side of this particular notcher to line up with that center line that we made on the fab table. Once we get it lined up, it's kind of hard to see because it's black on black, but once we get it lined up, we need the center of our hole saw to line up with the center of that line. And you can use a ruler if you had to, but I'm going to go with about right there, because if we look down the center, it looks like the center of this notcher is going to land right at the center of that tube. As long as we have that set up, and then our center line of our tube set in place, now we can start notching. You always want to keep a little flathead or something to knock those ears out of your hole saw, because you don't want to get those jammed up on your tubing. So now that we finished the first 24 degrees notch, we need to do a 35 degrees on this side, and we are going to want to rotate it 180 degrees like this and bring the notch in from the opposite side of the tube. But first we need to set up our die again to 35 degrees. And we're making sure to line up that center line mark that we made with the flat side of this die. Now, before we go fit it in the chassis, I'm going to clean up the burrs and stuff made by the notcher, and we're going to knock down these long tongues a little bit. Time to go ahead and remove the string line tool because we are done with it. Like I said, if you have a 3D printer, you can print off all these tools and buy the hardware kit from them. They just want to get people out in their garage working, which is pretty amazing. You don't see companies like that anymore. All they care about is your almighty dollar, and the fact that they're open sources speaks for the authenticity of their company, and they're made right here in America. by Americans. So it's nice to support the American dream. And you can save 5% on any of these tools by using Redbeard 5. We are partnered with them, and we're super pumped about it because this is going to save me a ton of time, and the amount of tube that I would waste on a random weird notch is going to go down dramatically, and the price of tubing is going up. So this is going to honestly save you money in the long run. So this is the first dry fit. We haven't tweaked anything, and there we go.
Beautiful.
So that's the 35-degree notch, and this is the 24-degree notch. Super clean. That's ready to MIG or TIG weld. And of course, if you wanted this notch to come in, you know, way back here and go way up there, you would have just measured for that. But of course, we was measuring for right there. So that's nice, because before we'd have been playing around. I would have been laying a tube up here like this, and then marking it with a Sharpie, marking it, and then going in there and guesstimating my angle. And then, I mean, it was just, there's times I got good at it, unfortunately, but it still takes way more time than using this string line kit. Such a simple tool that speeds up so much. So we're pumped to have Centurial as part of our fleet of tools to fabricate chassis. Hope you guys will check them out. They're located in the video's description. They do help us out. The discount code's located down there as well. And like I said, if you have a 3D printer, go check out their website. You can print, you can download all the stuff to print. And awesome company, awesome group of guys. And we can't wait to show you guys what we're going to build using Centurial tools. So check them out, and we'll see you on the next one. We love you guys, and God bless.